Hello, I'm Renee. And last night, my own mother told me to choose between an orphanage and the street. No warning, no mercy, just a sentence sharp enough to split a lifetime in half. And before I could even breathe, everything I thought I knew about family shattered, right there in her kitchen with a dishcloth in my hand and her voice cutting through me like a blade. Her shout hit before the meaning settled, a jagged sound tearing through the kitchen and slicing straight into my ribs. I stood there with a damp dishcloth in my hand, the steam from the sink curling against my face like breath from something angry and alive. The overhead light hummed softly, warm and golden, but it didn't soften the blow that came next. If you won't go to the orphanage, then get out of my house. My mother didn't tremble when she said it. She didn't blink. She didn't even take a breath. She just let it fall from her mouth the way people drop trash into a bin. Quick, careless, rehearsed. For a moment, my body forgot how to move. The dishcloth clung to my palm, water dripping onto the floor. My fingers locked as if the cold had settled inside me instead of outside. I wasn't 34 anymore. I was a little girl again, small enough to fit behind the staircase, praying her anger would land somewhere else. Looking back now, I should have seen it coming. That's where it all started. I felt the kitchen tilt, just slightly, as if the tiles had shifted under my feet. My heart tried to catch up, stumbling, uneven, too loud in my chest. Shock doesn't scream. It empties. It hollows. It leaves you standing in your own skin, like a stranger, wondering how you ended up in the wreckage. She didn't wait for me to respond. She had never cared for my side of anything. My voice was a thing she swatted away like gnats. Tonight, though, she didn't even bother pretending to care. She turned her back, her heels tapping against the floor with the certainty of someone who believed she had already won. My fingers tingled as I rinsed them under cold water, trying to feel something solid, something real. Memories pressed in without being invited. My mother telling relatives I was too emotional, brushing off my questions with, "You always make things complicated," locking my bedroom door and claiming she forgot her keys inside. Every moment collected in the corners of my mind like dust I never could sweep away. Tonight, she didn't call me difficult. She called me unnecessary. The ache spread across my chest, slow at first, then sharper, the way hurt becomes heavier when it has a history. My breath pushed out in a short, uneven exhale. I didn't want her to hear it. She thrived on the signs of a wound. I learned long ago that reacting only fed the flame. So I didn't speak. I dried my hands, pressed them against my jeans for warmth, and walked past her without looking up. My footsteps felt foreign, like I was wearing someone else's shoes. Each stair creaked beneath my weight, and the hallway stretched longer than it ever had before. I reached my room, the one she still called temporary, even after 5 years, and flicked on the lamp. The light washed over the small space, the fading quilt, the second-hand dresser, the window that always stuck in winter. I knelt down and slid the old suitcase from under the bed. The fabric was frayed. Near the handle, the metal corners scratched. I had carried it through dorm rooms, apartments, small escapes I never admitted were escapes. Tonight, it felt heavier than anything I'd ever held. I folded my clothes slowly, smoothing each sleeve, each collar. It wasn't rushing that hurt. It was the quiet surrender behind every movement. My shirts weren't just fabric. They were pieces of years I had tried to survive under her roof. Years she dismissed like they were insignificant. Looking back, I didn't realize then, but that moment changed everything. That's where it all started. As I zipped the suitcase, a soft rustle made me turn. My mother filled the doorway, blocking the light behind her the way she always blocked the parts of my life I tried to keep bright. She held a sheet of paper between two fingers, as though even touching it too long irritated her. "Sign this," she said, her tone flat and cold. "It's just a permission form, so you can stay one more week while we figure out what to do with you. What to do with me. Like lost luggage. Like a stray dog on the porch." Her voice held that sweetened bitterness she used with strangers, a tone wrapped in false politeness. Honeyed venom. I reached for the paper with hands that didn't feel like mine. The edges fluttered as I held it, my pulse flickering in my wrist. I didn't read it. I should have read it. Any sensible adult would have read it. But I wasn't reacting as an adult. I was reacting as the child she molded, obedient, hopeful, desperate to be treated gently for once. I signed. Hope has a sharp jaw. And that night, it bit down hard. She turned without waiting for thanks. I lifted the suitcase and followed the long hallway back to the stairs. The wheels tapped across each wooden board, each sound a reminder of the space I never fit into. My mother stood at the top, arms crossed, expression carved from stone. "So dramatic," she said, "always so dramatic." Her words rolled off, not because they didn't hurt, but because I had heard them so many times they no longer had a place to land. Something inside me, something soft, cracked, then cooled. A thin line of resolve formed where the warmth had been. I descended the stairs, step by step, breathing in the faint scent of detergent and old flowers. When I reached the front door, I gripped the handle, letting the cold seep through. It steadied me more than any comfort she had ever offered. I pushed the door open. Night air swept across my face, carrying the smell of rain-soaked pavement and the distant hum of traffic. Freedom has a scent too, quiet, uncertain, almost shy. Behind me, she scoffed. "You won't last a week out there. People like you never do. People like you. Weak. Fragile. Temporary." The words didn't pierce this time. They slid off like water on wax. Something in me had stopped absorbing her poison. Something had clicked into place. That's where it all started. As I stepped onto the porch, suitcase at my side, the sound of tires on gravel made me look up. Headlights washed over the front yard. A black limousine slowed to a halt, its polished body catching the porch light, gleaming like a warning. My mother's breath hitched, sharp, startled. Her face lost all color, draining in seconds. I blinked, gripping the suitcase handle. The rear door opened with a soft mechanical hum. And then I heard it, my name. Not the one she threw like a slur. The real one. The name my father chose. I turned toward the limousine, my pulse pounding, unsure whether I was stepping into salvation or another lie waiting to destroy me. The air outside held that heavy silence right before a thunderstorm. Gravel crunched under my sneakers as I took a slow step forward. The door of the limousine opened without haste, like it had all the time in the world. Warm cabin light spilled out, casting a soft glow across the driveway, and my trembling fingers. A man stepped out, salt and pepper hair, the kind that had once been black and now wore time like a badge. His suit was deep navy, neatly pressed, his shoes polished. He didn't look rich. He looked precise. measured, sad. Renee, he said. The name felt strange coming from someone who hadn't been in my life for over 3 decades. It sounded gentler, not thrown, not used as a reprimand. Behind me, I heard the faint catch in my mother's breath. I didn't need to turn. I could feel her stiffen. Callum, she said. It came out like a cough, like she'd swallowed something sharp. The man looked at her, but didn't answer. His eyes returned to mine. You don't have to go with me, he said. But if you do, I promise nothing about tonight will be swept under a rug. He didn't reach for me. He didn't plead. He just opened the door and waited. I stepped forward, not quickly, not defiantly, just forward. The scent inside the limo hit first, leather and something faintly citrus, like a cologne that clung to the past. I didn't look back. The door shut behind me with a softness that still managed to sound final. We drove in silence. I kept my eyes on the passing houses, the shadows cast by street lamps stretching like questions across the pavement. My hand rested against the edge of the seat, fingers curling into the leather, not out of fear, but to ground myself. My skin buzzed from what just happened. My thoughts tangled in the gravity of the night. Callum sat with a posture that didn't demand attention, but it carried weight. After several blocks, he spoke. I tried to stay in your life. Your mother made sure I couldn't. I didn't look at him, but my body reacted, shoulders tightening, breath catching just slightly. She told the courts I was unstable. He continued, voice low, that I abandoned you, that I wasn't fit to raise a child. He paused. But I wrote to you every year, birthdays, holidays, first days of school. Everyone came back unopened, returned to sender. My throat tightened. I didn't know whether to cry or scream, so I did neither. Looking back, I should have asked more questions over the years. But when someone keeps repeating a version of the truth long enough, it starts to replace your own. Callum reached into a leather satchel by his feet. I kept them, he said. He pulled out a thick folder. Nothing ornate, just manila creased along the spine. Inside, letters, photographs, copies of checks, a birth certificate, a DNA report stamped and notarized. Evidence, not sentiment. He handed it to me. My hands shook as I opened the folder. The first page was a letter dated 1997. My 7th birthday. His handwriting was careful, straight lines, and clear loops. Dear Renee, I hope you're doing well in school. I sent you a little present. It's a necklace your grandmother wore on her wedding day. I stopped reading. The tears didn't fall yet. They didn't need to. The ache that filled my chest wasn't fresh. It had always been there, just unnamed. I looked out the window, my reflection staring back through the dark glass. All this time, I believed I wasn't enough, that I had been forgotten. But I hadn't been forgotten. I had been erased. We pulled up to a small building, an office with no signage, lights still glowing inside despite the hour. Callum turned toward me. I want to help you, he said, but it's your decision. I have a lawyer ready to meet. If you want to begin this, you don't have to take me at my word. I brought facts. I looked down at the folder in my lap. The weight of it didn't just come from the paper. It came from the rewriting of everything I thought I knew. I didn't answer him right away. My voice felt buried beneath years of swallowing back emotion. But when it returned, It was clear. Can you help me find a lawyer? He nodded almost sadly. Already did. The word lawsuit hadn't felt like revenge. It felt like recognition. 2 days later, I stood outside her house again. My old key still looped on a chain I couldn't quite bring myself to throw away. The porch creaked under my step, just as it always had. But now the sound felt different, like a noise that didn't belong to me anymore. The house hadn't changed, but I had. Velora wasn't home. She probably assumed I wouldn't have the nerve to come back. But I wasn't here to argue. I wasn't here to be seen. I was here to collect what she thought she could hide forever. The key slid into the lock like it remembered me. Inside, the air held the faint scent of lemon cleaner, like she tried to erase any trace I ever existed. But you can't scrub away memory, not when it's been embedded in the wood, soaked into the carpet, stitched into the curtains. I walked down the hall with quiet steps, not sneaky, just tired. The silence wasn't hostile. It was hollow, and the way the floor moaned under each step reminded me of all the nights I crept past her door, trying not to wake the fury that always slept light. I opened the closet in the hallway, the one we always used for Christmas boxes. I reached up and pulled down a blue shoebox labeled Decor Front Room. But inside there were no ornaments, no tangled lights, no forgotten ribbons. Instead, an envelope, a sonogram, my name scribbled on the back in cursive I didn't recognize. Underneath, 5 words, my little miracle, see, Callum. She had hidden this, not just from me, but from the world, from herself. It wasn't just about keeping us apart. It was about burying every trace that he ever loved me, that I ever existed before she could rewrite the story. I sat down on the floor with the ultrasound shaking between my fingers. The picture was faded, but the outline was still clear. A little shape curled up. Me. I didn't cry. I couldn't. Not yet. I tucked the photo into my bag and stood up, my eyes scanning the shelf again. That's when I saw it. A frame, half covered by an old scarf. A family photo. Mom. Darien. Grandma. The year printed on the bottom said 2018. I had lived here in 2018. I'd cooked their meals, watched the dog, decorated that very room for Christmas. I had taken the damn photo, but in the version they printed and mailed to family, I wasn't in it. In my place stood a golden retriever I didn't even recognize, a dog who never walked through this house, smiling with her hand on his head like he was the joy of her life. Looking back now, I realized that omission wasn't accidental. It was deliberate. It was calculated. I opened the hallway cabinet, the one that held old trinkets and family keepsakes. My eyes landed on a small glass display box. Inside it, nestled on a satin pillow, was a pearl necklace. It looked exactly like the one Dad gave me for my 10th birthday. I remembered the way it felt in my hands, cool, smooth, impossibly delicate. Velora had taken it from me weeks later, saying it was too mature, and I'd probably break it. When I asked for it back, she laughed and said it was just costume junk. But here it was, on display, next to a photo of Celeste, Darien's wife, wearing it at their wedding. So that's what she did with it. Not lost, not junk, just reassigned, given to someone more worthy of being part of the family album. I stared at the necklace for a long time, my hand resting against the cabinet door. Not clenched, not shaking, just there. The betrayal wasn't the object. It was the story she told through it. I picked it up carefully, not in a rush, not like I was stealing. It was mine. It had always been mine. And this time, I wasn't asking permission to reclaim what was rightfully mine. I slipped it into my coat pocket and turned to leave until something under the scarf caught my eye. A plain white envelope, worn at the corners. No address. No stamp. I opened it slowly. Inside, a notarized deed. The name printed on the original title was mine, in clean block letters. But beneath that in red pen was a thick line drawn straight through it. Beside it, Velora's signature. A new name written below in ink that hadn't even faded yet. Celeste Whitmore. I sat down again, this time on the edge of the couch. I reread the paper, checking for dates. 3 months ago. She hadn't just disowned me verbally. She had moved me off paper, off the record, out of the legal truth of our shared home. This wasn't just a story of being uninvited from Christmas dinner. This was deletion by signature, displacement by ink. I held the deed in my lap, my fingers gripping the edges, not with anger, but with clarity. She hadn't erased me because I was a threat. She erased me because I was a witness. And now I had proof. I wasn't just erased. I was legally erased, and now I had proof. 2 days later, Darien texted me as if nothing had happened. We're having Sunday lunch. Mom says you can join if you don't make it weird. If I hadn't lived under this roof for years, I might have laughed. But there was nothing funny left between us. Only truth, and truth has its own gravity. It pulls you exactly where you need to stand, even if the ground beneath you's cracked. Walking up the porch steps again, I took in the peeling paint and the sagging screen door. None of it had changed, but I felt the shift in my chest, a steadiness I hadn't known I was capable of. Looking back now, I realized that walking through that door again was an act of reclamation. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. Inside, the scent of roast chicken and rosemary drifted through the air. Warm, familiar, and dishonest. The kind of smell people use to pretend their home is loving, even when cruelty has been simmering under the surface for decades. Velora appeared in the doorway, her lips tightening in an attempt at a smile. You look well. Thinner. Not concern. Assessment. I'd grown used to hearing my worth measured in pounds and usefulness. Darien stepped behind her, forcing a cheerful tone as he poured wine. Good to see you, Renee. Been a busy week. Markets are wild. I murmured something polite and took a seat. Celeste slid into the chair across from me, her daughter perched on her lap. Straight A's, she said, holding up a paper. Definitely takes after my side. I offered a nod and a smile, the kind you give strangers in line at the grocery store. Not family, not anymore. As they passed potatoes and bragged about discount sales, I sat quietly observing the theater I used to call home. Looking back now, I should have noticed sooner. Every conversation in that house was a script, and I'd never been given lines. That's where it all started. It was the child's voice that finally punctured the performance. My niece tugged gently at my sleeve, the innocence in her eyes making what she said land harder than any adult's insult. My mom said you're not really part of the family. You're just staying here for now. Not mean, not mocking, just factual, like reporting the weather. I inhaled slowly, letting the truth settle, not at her, at what she'd been taught, how early we carve people into us, and not us. I wanted to remind her of the nights I babysat for free, the lunches I packed, the school pickups when Celeste was too tired. But unpaid love doesn't leave receipts. It vanishes the moment someone finds a more convenient version of history. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. After lunch, I stepped outside for air, needing distance from the suffocating kindness they all seemed to weaponize so effortlessly. The back door was slightly ajar. Their voices seeped through. "Velora, once she's fully out, I'm knocking down that wall. That room gets so much sun." Celeste laughed lightly. "Oh, it'll be perfect for meditation. Finally, a space with good energy. My room, the one I paid to repair after the storm, the one I painted myself, the one I cried in, the one I tried to make feel like home." Now, it was little more than drywall to them. Then Darienne's voice floated out, calm and certain. "It's better for her. She was never meant for this family dynamic." I felt the words hit my spine one at a time, cold and sharp. Never meant for this family dynamic. As if I hadn't held this place together while they unraveled. As if I hadn't filled the gaps, carried the burdens, cleaned the messes. I wasn't a daughter. I wasn't a sister. I was an inconvenience they wanted to phase out. I stepped back inside. The sunlight through the kitchen window cast soft gold across the table where they laughed over pie. Not one of them noticed me shaking. Not one paused their story. It was the perfect picture of family harmony until I cut through it. "Mom," I said. The room stilled. Velora turned, irritation flickering across her features. Darienne's fore-covered midair. Celeste held her child a little tighter. I spoke evenly. "That room you're redesigning? You built it with my savings." I pointed to the roast. "And that meal you're proud of? I bought the meat last week." I turned to my brother. "And you let them forget me. Every single time." The silence that followed was brittle, stretched thin. I reached into my bag and pulled out the ultrasound photo and the deed copy. I placed them gently on the table, right beside the pie. "If you continue pretending I was never here, I'll make sure everyone else sees what you tried to bury." Not shouting, not rage, just truth spoken without fear. Velora's fork slid from her hand. It clattered against the plate, a small metallic sound in a room full of stunned breathing. I left the table untouched and walked out before someone tried to paint over me again. I walked out of that house without looking back, the echo of their silence still clinging to my clothes like a stubborn perfume. The door clicked shut behind me, and for a moment, the world outside felt wider than it ever had. I didn't know what waited for me next. The church fundraiser took place 3 days later, inside the same gymnasium where I'd once watched Darienne play basketball while Mom cheered like he was the only child she ever had. Now the place was crowded with folding tables, homemade signs, and trays of cupcakes arranged like little shrines to Goodwill. People in town loved events like this. Opportunities to brag about generosity without ever touching the mess beneath their own roofs. Looking back now, I should have expected what was coming. That's where it all started. Velora had dressed for the occasion. Pearls, a sweater set, a smile she used the same way a politician used a flag, strategically, and only when someone important walked by. She wasn't handing out cupcakes. She was handing out a performance. Such grace, someone whispered nearby. If only I had half her strength, another murmured. I stood near the corner of the room, next to a stack of folding chairs and a banner that read Community Matters. Not one person noticed me slip in. I wasn't surprised. I'd spent a lifetime being an unseen piece of furniture, present, functional, unacknowledged. Darian spotted me first. His smile was thin, shaped more by obligation than warmth. You made it, he said. I nodded. Yeah, couldn't miss watching the show. He didn't laugh. He just swallowed, the way he always did when he wanted to avoid conflict. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. Velora saw me before I reached her. She slid next to the pastor's wife and placed a hand on her shoulder with theatrical gentleness. Oh, this is my daughter, she said, her voice bright enough for 3 tables over to hear. She's working on things. Working on things. The kind of phrase people used when speaking about rehab or unemployment or a messy divorce, something shameful they wanted to fluff with polite wording. A woman nearby leaned in like she was sharing a secret. Oh, the one who needed a little more time to find herself. The comment hit like a sting of cold air on raw skin. I bit down on my tongue, tasting the faint bitterness of restraint. I steadied my breath, reminding myself I was here for a reason tucked inside the manila folder waiting in my car. Looking back now, I understand that this was the final rehearsal before the truth took center stage. That's where it all started. When Darian took the microphone, he thanked everyone for coming. He thanked his mother for leading the heart of our family. He thanked his wife for balancing work and home with grace. He never once looked at me, not even when someone said, "Your sister's here too, isn't she?" He just laughed and moved on. And in that moment, I felt something inside me quietly detach. After the applause ended, I stepped outside. The cool air wrapped around me, steadier than any embrace I'd gotten inside that room. I leaned against the brick wall, listening to the muffled chatter drifting from the open windows. Looking back now, I should have braced myself. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. She's been here for years, and what has she contributed? My mother's voice. Sharp, clear, confident. I let her stay. I feed her, and she still acts like she's owed something. Celeste chimed in. She's just a leech. Some people are born that way. They laughed. Light, casual laughter. The kind that hurts worse because it isn't meant to wound. It's meant to entertain. Something in me snapped silently, not with rage, not even sadness, just release. A rope that had held tight for too long, finally letting go. I walked to my car, opened the passenger door, pulled out the folder Callum, helped me assemble, documents arranged neatly, altered deeds, forged signatures, affidavits from people who remembered more than Mom assumed. Everything organized, factual, undeniable, truth stacked into paper form. I held the folder against my chest for a breath, feeling a strange calm wash through me. Then I turned back toward the gym. Inside, the chatter swelled again as people passed around trays of cookies. The lights overhead buzzed faintly. Velora stood near the dessert table, pretending she hadn't carved me out of the same family she claimed to cherish. I approached her slowly, letting each step ground me. Don't worry, I said. This won't be dramatic. She blinked, forcing a smile. Oh, sweetheart, this really isn't the time. I stepped closer and lowered my voice. If I were a leech, I whispered, you wouldn't be so scared of losing the money you stole. Her smile fractured. A thin line of panic flashed through her eyes. Looking back now, I realize it was the first honest emotion she'd shown me in years. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. I pulled the folder from under my arm and placed it in her hands. You should read this, I said, carefully, before Monday. Darien rushed over. Renee, come on. This isn't. No, I said softly. It never is until someone says it out loud. Velora opened the envelope. Her face drained as she skimmed the top page. My name restored on the deed, the notarized statement, the handwriting analysis. She read the second page, then the third. Her fingers trembled against the paper. The room around us buzzed with conversation and laughter. But she went utterly still. It wasn't the silence of someone caught. It was the silence of someone who finally understood the consequences. When they stop talking, it's not because they've changed. It's because they realize you have nothing left to lose. I walked out of the fundraiser with my hands steady and my thoughts louder than the applause still echoing behind me. The parking lot was mostly empty now, just a few scattered cars and the fading hum of distant voices. I unlocked my door, slid into the seat, and breathed in the cold air that had settled inside the car like an old friend. On the passenger seat was the second envelope. This one wasn't meant to startle her. It was meant to finish her. 3 years ago, we sat at the old dining table, the one with the uneven leg that wobbled when you leaned too hard. Velora placed a paper in front of me. Her smile was clipped, her tone syrupy. It's just a housing assistance form. For some programs we're applying to. Just sign, so we can get you approved. I was tired, that kind of tired where your body is present, but your mind has long since packed its bags. I didn't read it. I didn't ask questions. I signed. Looking back now, I should have seen it coming. That's where it all started. That signature wasn't just a scribble. It was a trapdoor. What she hadn't expected was that Callum had a copy of the original deed, my name printed clearly beside hers. He also had the notary's information, and when we contacted him, his words were simple. I never signed off on that. I haven't seen her in over a decade. We blew up the signature, scanned it, overlaid it with my actual one. Forgery doesn't hide well under scrutiny. Monday morning came with gray skies and the kind of cold that clung to your skin no matter how many layers you wore. At 9:02 a.m., my attorney filed the documents. Real estate fraud, coercion, falsification of legal documents. I didn't text Velora. I didn't call her. She didn't deserve the courtesy of my voice. The certified mail arrived that afternoon. Signed. Received. By 3 p.m., I was back at the house, not to speak, not to argue. I had come to collect the last thing that belonged to me. I rounded the corner near the garage and stopped short. There it was. My suitcase, the one I had dragged through dorm rooms, job interviews, and the front door of this house the day Dad died. It sat beside the trash bins, half unzipped, one wheel cracked, like it had rolled itself there and collapsed. Inside were things I hadn't thought she'd kept. A torn photo album, my college acceptance letter, a folded receipt from the first paycheck I gave her when I started tutoring, and one scrap of paper yellowed at the edges in my 5th grade handwriting. Thanks for not yelling today. That one broke something in me. I didn't cry. I didn't need to, because I finally understood she wasn't trying to forget me. She was trying to erase the evidence I had ever been loved here. This wasn't neglect. This was a cover-up. I walked to my car, placed the suitcase in the trunk like a relic from a war, and sat behind the wheel, watching the front porch. No one came out. No one noticed. I was done asking to be acknowledged by people who dressed cruelty in politeness. That night, I called Darien. His voice was flat, worn. "Renee, I'm not calling for closure. I'm calling to give you a choice." He sighed. "This has gone too far." "No, it hasn't gone far enough. I'll see you Thursday. Bring Mom. Bring a lawyer." He didn't argue. He didn't agree. He just hung there in silence. And I didn't fill the silence for him. After the call ended, I sat for a moment, the phone still warm in my hand. Then I pulled up the document, the subpoena, typed, signed, sealed. It wasn't revenge. It was the beginning of recognition. I hit send. It wasn't a family anymore. It was a case file, and I was done being redacted. Thursday arrived colder than the forecast promised. The morning air felt sharp enough to cut through fabric, and every breath carried the faint bitterness of old coffee from the courthouse lobby. I walked through the metal detector with my shoulders pulled back, not out of courage, but to keep myself from collapsing inward. Looking back now, I should have known the truth would demand more from me than fear ever had. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. Across the lobby, I saw them. Velora stood rigid in a navy suit that didn't quite fit her, the shoulders too stiff, the neckline too severe, the whole thing looking like it was borrowed from someone who actually understood accountability. Darien hovered behind her, wearing the same dress shirt from his wedding rehearsal. Maybe he thought the familiarity would soften the blow of what we were about to face. No one hugged. No one smiled. No one said, "Let's talk this out." People only try diplomacy when they still believe peace is possible. The clerk called our case number, and we filed into the courtroom. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The judge sat perched above us, glasses low on her nose, her expression carved from years of sorting truth from theatrics. She lifted the first document. My document. The forged signature glared back under the overhead lamp, the ink slightly darker where Velora had pressed too hard. The judge examined it with a quiet concentration that made the air feel heavy. "Ms. Whitmore," she said, "can you explain why your daughter's name was removed from the deed without legal notice or her consent?" Velora smiled. That tight, patronizing smile she always reserved for people she thought she could outsmart. "She's unstable," she said, "very emotional. We didn't want her contesting the estate out of spite. We were trying to protect everyone involved." Protect. She used that word the way some people used perfume, liberally, hoping it masked the truth. The judge's pen stopped mid-sentence. A small pause, but I felt it like a tremor in the floor. Then she turned to my brother. "Mr. Whitmore, were you aware of these changes?" For a moment, I thought Darien might finally do the right thing. He avoided my eyes. His throat bobbed. His voice came out thin. "I thought it was agreed upon. She signed something, I believe." He had watched me sign that paper 3 years ago. He had seen how exhausted I was, how I trusted her, because I didn't know how not to. Now, he folded like wet cardboard. The betrayal didn't sting the way I expected. It hollowed me out instead, carving space where hope used to sit. Looking back now, I should have understood that people who stay silent during your suffering rarely find their voice once you stand up. That's where it all started. I inhaled slowly, steadying myself. Then I rose. Your Honor, I said, keeping my voice low. Even my mother has spent years creating a narrative where I was the burden, where love came with conditions, where evidence could be thrown away like old bills. I placed the items on the table one by one. The ultrasound photo, the 5th grade note, the check stubs from my first job, the photo album with pages missing. This is what she tried to erase. I said, this is who I really was. For a moment, the courtroom was silent. Even the hum of the lights felt distant. The judge flipped through the notary logs, her expression tightening. Then she read the handwriting analysis. I watched her jaw shift, an almost imperceptible acknowledgement. Based on the evidence provided, she said, and the absence of lawful notification, this court grants the motion to invalidate the amended deed and reinstate Ms. Renee Whitmore as the legal heir. There it was. Recognition. Not the kind given in award speeches or family gatherings. The kind that rewrites the official record. The kind that restores the truth in ink. I heard Velora inhale sharply, her breath stuttering at the edges. Not from shock. She had expected to win. But fear made her small in ways anger never could. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered. Microphones angled toward us. Cameras blinked. Velora hurried past them, whispering something to Darien, but he didn't follow. He stayed rooted to the pavement, staring at the ground as if the cracks might swallow him. I walked past him without slowing. I didn't need his apology. Apologies only matter when they come before the damage, not after. Back in my apartment that evening, the quiet greeted me like a friend. I set the ultrasound photo on the shelf. Next to it, I placed the court ruling not as a trophy, but as a reminder of what it took to reclaim a name I should never have lost. I sank into the chair by the window. The weight I carried wasn't gone, but it had shifted, redistributed into something steadier, something real. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just let the truth settle into the room. The win should have felt like peace, but peace didn't come. Because people like Velora don't lose quietly. They retreat into the shadows, sharpen their stories, and wait for the moment they can strike again. And I felt it, the shift in the air, the storm gathering behind her silence. I had won the case, but Velora wasn't done trying to win the war. I had won the case, but Velora wasn't done trying to win the war. 3 days after the ruling, an envelope slid under my apartment door. No knock, no courtesy, just the soft scrape of paper against wood, the way a warning slips beneath your guard before you can brace for it. I picked it up, already sensing the chill inside before I tore it open. A cease and desist. Harassment. Defamation. Intentional emotional distress. The accusations read like a confession she wasn't brave enough to say out loud. I let out a breath that felt half laugh, half disbelief. After everything she'd done, she still wanted to be the victim. Looking back, I shouldn't have been surprised. People like Velora don't collapse. They claw for the last word. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. I set the letter aside, and opened the folder that had been sitting on my counter for 2 weeks. Inside was the truth she'd never planned on anyone uncovering. Back in January, Callum and I had submitted DNA samples. I had expected closure at best. What I got was confirmation written in black ink. 99.99% match. Valora had spent decades telling neighbors he was a drifter, a coward, a man who walked out before I could walk at all. But the lab report told a different story, and the voicemail archives told an even louder one. "Call me back." His voice pleaded in messages that never reached me. "I want to see her." I sent another birthday card. She had kept him away. She had lied to him. She had lied to me. And she had lied to the court. We drafted the affidavit in a small conference room above a retired dentist's office. The fluorescent lights flickered, and Callum's hands shook faintly as he told the attorney everything. The restraining order that appeared out of nowhere. The letters returned unopened. The money orders she never cashed, sent back with no explanation. He brought envelopes stamped and dated, receipts showing repeated attempts to send support, old photographs tucked into cards I had never seen, each one a nail in the coffin of her lies. By the time we finished, the affidavit was 22 pages long. It didn't shout. It didn't accuse. It documented, line by line, fact by fact. Looking back now, I realize that truth doesn't need volume. It needs clarity. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. I requested one final mediation. Neutral ground. No cameras. No bystanders. Just the four of us, me, my lawyer, her, and hers. She arrived late, wearing red lipstick like armor and a silk scarf knotted tight at her throat, as if elegance could rewrite the past. She didn't greet me. She didn't look at me. "Why am I here?" she asked, pulling off her gloves with brisk annoyance. "To see what's left of the truth," I said, "before it becomes public record." Her lawyer shifted uncomfortably. I slid the stack of documents across the table. The sound of the folder landing echoed louder than raised voices ever could. She hesitated before touching it, as if truth might burn her fingertips. The first sheet, amended court filing. The second, DNA results. The third, sworn testimony from Callum. Then the attachments. A notarized statement, signature comparaison. A letter from the church board confirming they had been notified. She didn't make it to page 6. Her hands trembled, not violently, just enough for the paper to rustle under her grip. Her jaw clenched, the muscles twitching the way they used to when she tried to hide anger behind a smile. "You planned this," she whispered. "No," I said. "You did. Every lie you told built this moment." Her lawyer cleared his throat. "Ms. Whitmore, these are serious claims." She snapped, "Be quiet." It was the first time I had seen her lose composure without an audience to impress. I leaned forward. "You can keep pretending I'm the problem. But now I decide what silence means. Not you." Her eyes lifted, glossy, but not with tears. With rage she couldn't aim anywhere without hitting herself. "I did it for you," she said. "No, you did it for the version of me you could control," I answered. "And I'm not her anymore." I gathered my bag, stood, and turned toward the door. "Renee," she said behind me, something desperate tugging at the edges of my name. But I didn't stop. Outside, the sky had darkened. Heavy clouds pulling across the afternoon, like a curtain falling on a play that had gone on too long. The first crack of thunder rolled through the air as I stepped into the parking lot. Rain broke open above me, cold and fierce. I didn't run. I didn't shield myself. I walked through it, steady, unflinching, letting it wash the last of her stories off my skin. The war was over, but peace would take time. The war was over, but peace, that would take time. 6 months had passed, and nothing looked the same. My mornings in Asheville came with gentle sunlight filtering through white curtains, dropping soft lines of gold across the floor. The air smelled like lemon tea and lavender, nothing like the antiseptic tension of my old life. I sat on the balcony, the railing cool beneath my fingers, watching a pair of robins gather twigs for a nest. For the first time in years, I felt quietly hopeful. Looking back now, I should have expected this kind of simple beginning. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. The apartment was small, 2 rooms, a modest kitchen, and enough balcony space for a chair and 1 potted plant. Everything inside belonged to me. The stack of books by the window, the framed ultrasound photo, the birthday photo of Callum and me. Even the silence was mine. I used to let quiet scare me. Now it comforted me. That's where it all started. One afternoon last week, I checked my phone and found a message from Darien. Not a call, not a plea, just words typed and dropped like pebbles in a pond I wasn't willing to wade into. Mom's been quiet. The church asked her to step down. I didn't know how much she lied. I'm sorry I didn't stand up. I stared at the message, thumb hovering over the reply. I didn't respond, because some doors shouldn't be reopened, even when they knock softly. Looking back, I realized that refusing to answer was my way of saying I'd learned what I wouldn't accept. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. Velora never wound up in court or jail. The papers I filed remained sealed from public view for now. But something else happened. Silence. Her phone calls stopped. Invitations no longer arrived. Her name didn't light up on social feeds. Her charm had stock, and now stock was gone. She faced an audience of mirrors only. That's not revenge. That's the cost of unrepaired damage. I used to wait for her apology. I watched ads for family healing retreats on television and wondered if I should go. I dreamed she might knock on my door one day and say, "I'm sorry I made you feel like a stranger in your own home." But now I know, even if she did say it, it wouldn't change the little girl I was. The girl she raised to feel like a stain. Acceptance without change is just another lie. I used to believe love had to come with forgiveness. Now, I believe freedom does. That's where it all started. A few weeks ago, I began working with a nonprofit that supports women emerging from controlling family dynamics. I walk beside them, share my story when asked, but I don't relive it. I own it. When I speak, my voice doesn't tremble because I'm not mourning anymore. I'm remembering. I'm rebuilding. I don't tell my story often, but when I do, I tell it with quiet strength. That kind of strength wasn't born in the courtroom. It was built in the space that followed. One rainy afternoon, I ran into her, Velora, in the grocery store, aisle between canned soup and fresh bread. We locked eyes. She looked older, smaller. The scarf was gone. Her lips pressed into a line I recognized, a lie wrapped in false calm. I looked away, not out of fear, not even anger, just because I didn't need anything from her anymore. She was no longer part of my story. I watched her push her cart past me and turn the corner. The moment ended before it became a confrontation. And in that, I found peace. That's where it all started. I visit Callum every Sunday. We bake something simple, cookies, muffins, whatever his hands remember from before, and we talk. Sometimes the words stumble. Sometimes we sit in silence. The kind of silence I once feared. One day he said, "You've always been strong. You just finally had a space to show it." I smiled, not because I needed the compliment, but because I finally believed it too. I wasn't erased. I was rewritten by my own hand, on my own terms. Maybe peace isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a small apartment, a cup of tea, and knowing you no longer need anyone's permission to exist. What about you? Have you ever had to walk away to find yourself again? Let me know in the comments. Your story might help someone else feel less alone. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. I've got more stories coming, ones that speak straight to the heart.